I stared at the envelope. It was thick, overstuffed, like someone had jammed as much paper into it as they physically could. The return address didn't surprise me. Karen Lancaster. In bold uppercase font, the envelope screamed legal stop. Notice inside was a full stack of pages, printed single-sided, double-spaced, and stapled at an angle like she'd done it herself in a rush. At the top, notice of lawsuit, emotional distress, assault via hazardous substances, threat to community peace. Hazardous substances? It was food-grade paint. I could have used it on cupcakes, but she wasn't trying to win. She was trying to bury me in paperwork, hoping I'd fold. It was intimidation, dressed up in legalese. Still, I played it smart. I called my lawyer, an old buddy from college named Russ, who owed me a few favors. After 5 minutes of reading, he chuckled. She's representing herself, he said, which is great news for us and terrible news for her. She claims I have automated anti-human weaponry, I said. That's not a thing. Unless you're building terminus. I almost laughed, but part of me was still tense. Karen had made it clear, this wasn't about rules or violations. This was a battle for control, and she was just getting warmed up. That night, I did a full sweep of the property, reset the paint canisters, checked the cameras, replaced the no trespassing signs she kept yanking down. I even bolted one into the bark of the oak tree near the dock. Just after midnight, the alert came again. Motion detected near the shed. I tapped into the live feed and sat up straight. Karen was back, but this time, she wasn't alone. 2 men followed her. One carried a crowbar, the other a flashlight and a camcorder. They moved with purpose, whispering but fast. Straight toward the side of my cabin. They weren't here to inspect, they were here to break in and film it. The first man raised the crowbar, glancing over his shoulder like a nervous raccoon. That's when it happened. A tripwire snapped under his boot. The side cannon fired a full gallon of neon orange dye blasted from a PVC pipe hidden under the porch steps. It hit him square in the chest. The second man flinched, slipped, and triggered another sensor by the rain barrel. A blue cannon erupted like a geyser, covering both of them in streaks of electric slime. Karen screamed, "Turn off the cameras. Get the butt." My cams caught everything. From 5 angles I called the sheriff before they even made it to their car. When deputies arrived, the 3 of them were soaked, humiliated, and trying to explain why they were breaking into a private cabin in the middle of the night with tools and a recording device. The officer leaned in, stared at the footage on my laptop, and slowly shook his head. "You told her to stay off your property," he said. "She ignored it, trespassed twice, and now she's bringing people with tools. That's felony territory." I thought it was over. I really did. But Karen wasn't arrested. She claimed she was filming evidence for court, that the 2 men were contractors, and the crowbar was for inspection access. The deputy didn't buy it, but they were released with a warning. She was careful, calculated, dangerous. That night, I couldn't sleep, because now I knew something for sure. Karen didn't want to sue me. She didn't want my cabin. She wanted to destroy it piece by piece, and make sure no one stopped her for the next few days. It was quiet, too quiet. No paint traps triggered, no camera alerts, no new forged violation notices plastered to my cabin door. At first I thought maybe she was done. Maybe the embarrassment of getting blasted by my paint cannons twice had finally broken her ego. Maybe, just maybe, she'd gotten the message, but deep down, I knew better. Karen wasn't the kind of person who lost and walked away. No, she was regrouping, planning something worse. Something I wouldn't see coming. It started subtly. A pickup truck drove past my cabin slowly one afternoon, the driver glaring, then another. I recognized the second guy. He was the bait shop owner, a few miles down the road, usually friendly. Now, not even a nod. Then the whispers started. At the general store, a cashier gave me a weird look when I bought gas and bread. "You're the guy with the landmines, right?" She asked. "What, the paint explosives?" Karen said, "You almost blinded a surveyor. Said it's a miracle nobody's dead." I stared at her. "That's not true. None of it." She shrugged, unconvinced. "Well, maybe keep your crazy machines off the walking trails." Yeah, walking trails. This was my land. There were no public trails. But Karen had been busy. Printed fake HOA newsletters and mailed them out to the other cabin owners around the lake. In them, she wrote, that I was a dangerous recluse, that I'd trapped my land with chemical deterrents, that I threatened her and resisted community cooperation, and most incredibly, that I was planning to sue her for trying to build a community center on shared lakefront. She had rewritten the entire story. She wasn't trying to beat me in court. She was trying to turn everyone else against me. So when she finally made her big move, nobody would defend me. It almost worked. Later that week, I got a notice from the county building inspector, a surprise safety audit scheduled for my property. A coincidence? Not likely. The day he arrived, so did Karen, dressed in a blazer, clipboard in hand, wearing sunglasses like she was auditioning for a TV courtroom drama. "I'm just here to observe," she said sweetly. The inspector walked the property. I followed silently, arms crossed, while Karen rattled off complaints beside him. Mold in the gutters, possibly unstable dock, non-compliant fencing height, improvised chemical dispersal units that could explode. He looked at me. I didn't flinch. I led him around. Showed him the blueprints. Showed him the cameras, the signs, the fully licensed air canisters. I even let him examine one of the paint traps. He raised an eyebrow. Ingenious, he murmured. You build this yourself. Every piece. Karen kept interrupting, trying to find fault, trying to twist every observation into a violation, but the inspector was smarter than she'd hoped. An hour later, he handed me the signed form. Everything here's legal, he said. In fact, you've got better documentation than most contractors. Karen's mouth hung open. She tried to argue. He shut her down. I don't work for your HOA, ma'am. This isn't your jurisdiction. She left in silence that day, but her eyes, they were different. No more smugness. Just a quiet fury. The kind that doesn't boil. It freezes. Cold and patient. That night, I found a rock through my window. No note. Just shattered glass and silence. That was her warning shot. She'd failed to beat me legally. She'd failed to humiliate me publicly. So now, she was going dark. The gloves were off, and I wasn't going to wait around for her next move. By the next morning, I was done playing defense. Karen had declared war, and while I never wanted it, I wasn't about to roll over and hand her the victory. The rock through my window had changed everything. It wasn't about violations or bylaws anymore. This was personal. She wanted to break me, make me snap, paint me as the villain, so she could tighten her grip on the lakefront community. So I started digging. First, I filed a police report, not because I expected anything to come of it, but because I wanted it on record. If things escalated, and I knew they would, I needed every incident documented. Then I turned my attention to her so-called HOA. It didn't take much. A few hours online, some public record searches, and a call to the county clerk's office. No legally registered HOA existed for Craterbend Lake. There was no board, no articles of incorporation, no tax ID, nothing. Karen had forged the whole thing, and worse, she'd collected membership dues from at least 4 other cabin owners based on it. That was fraught. But I wasn't done yet. I reached out to an old friend, Jeff, a quiet guy who worked in digital forensics and owed me a few favors from a project years back. Can you trace newsletters? I asked him. He laughed. Depends how dumb your enemy is. Karen was very dumb. Her HOA newsletters had been emailed and printed locally, and with a little sleuthing, Jeff traced the digital fingerprints, her home IP address, her name listed in document properties, even timestamps showing edits made after she claimed to have distributed them. That was evidence. Now, I just needed a plan. I compiled everything into a digital folder. Photos, videos, witness accounts, legal property maps, IP address traces, even a scanned image of the original fake violation notice she'd nailed to my door. But the most important part, I found something she'd never meant to show anyone. While pulling up her county filings, I came across a zoning complaint she'd submitted under a different name, targeting the cabin next to mine. She had claimed the owner was hosting illegal parties and demanded the property be rezoned for commercial review. The owner was a widow in her 60s, lived alone, barely had guests. Karen was using the HOA scam not just to bully, but to forcibly push out neighbors she didn't like. Now, I had leverage. Instead of calling the sheriff or the press, I made one quiet move. I printed all the evidence, sealed it in a manila envelope, and hand-delivered it to the widow, who was named Martha. She opened it slowly, scanned the papers, and looked at me with disbelief. She tried to have me evicted, Martha whispered. I nodded. She's trying to take this whole lake. Martha wasn't some helpless retiree. She'd been a civil clerk before she moved out here, sharp as a tack, and well-connected. I'll call the others, she said. They need to see this. That afternoon, everything shifted. By sunset, 3 other cabin owners had seen the documents. One of them, Mr. Halvorsen, had paid Karen nearly $800 in back dues. Just last month. Now he was furious. A meeting was called, not an HOA meeting, a real one between neighbors, without Karen, and I made sure every camera on my property was working when she showed up the next morning and realized she was no longer being listened to. She stood in the road, staring at the group on Martha's porch, arms crossed, lips pressed tight. She knew something had changed, and she wasn't wrong, because what she didn't know was this. I'd also contacted a local journalist, and tomorrow, her name, her fraud, her trespassing, her schemes would hit the news. The story broke the next morning. I woke up to the ping of my phone, buzzing nonstop. Texts, emails, missed calls, local HOA president, exposed for fraud, fake dues, and property schemes. Right on the front page of the town's online paper. Below the headline was a photo of Karen in her blazer, standing in front of her lake house with that same smug clipboard, eyes narrowed like she was judging the entire planet. The article laid everything bare. The fake HOA, the unregistered documents, the intimidation, the dues she'd collected under false pretenses, even the paint cannon incident. Only this time, the footage showed her creeping into someone's private property at night, not the way she'd spun it in her fake newsletter. By noon, the fallout had begun. Halvorsen demanded his $800 back in writing. Martha went straight to the sheriff's office to file an official complaint. Armed with a folder of my evidence and her own city clerk credentials, 2 of the other cabin owners announced they were pulling out of Karen's HOA, effective immediately. Not that there was anything legal to leave in the first place. It should have ended there. But of course Karen didn't fold. She exploded. At 4:17 p.m., a town-wide email from her newly created address, justiceforthelakefront@eaglemail.net, hit everyone's inbox. It was 5 pages long, single-spaced. Accused the journalist of coordinating with domestic extremists. She called me a militant trap builder who had radicalized the elderly. She said the paint on her clothes had caused permanent skin staining, and hinted that she might have early-stage chemical poisoning. The final paragraph dropped a bomb. She was filing a class action lawsuit against me, Martha Halvorsen, and any additional parties found to have conspired in a smear campaign targeting the Craterbend Lakeside Preservation Board. There was no such board. But now she was going scorched-earth. The sheriff's department posted a statement that night confirming an active investigation into fraud, harassment, and trespassing. That didn't stop Karen. The next day she put up massive wooden signs at the edge of her property. You are entering a hostile zone. Beware of cabin number 6. They use weapons. I lived in cabin #6. She painted the signs herself, misspelled weapons once, then crossed it out angrily with red paint, like a kid who failed a spelling test. Then came the biggest twist yet. Jeff, my tech friend, called. Hey, he said, I went down a rabbit hole last night. Thought I'd look into Karen's past. And I found something. What kind of something? She's been banned from managing 3 separate HOA boards. Different towns? Different states? Every time she tried the same thing, took control, started shaking people down, and got booted. There's even a pending restraining order from a guy in Oregon. I sat there, stunned. Why isn't this public? It's buried in court, records and housing archives, but I've got it all. He emailed me the files, PDFs, screenshots, letters from former neighbors who described the same behavior I was living through now. Obsession, control, retaliation. It wasn't just a power trip. Karen had done this before, and she would do it again unless someone finally stopped her that night. I compiled everything into a new dossier, not just for the sheriff, but for a civil attorney, because now, I wasn't just going to defend myself, I was going to sue her for slander, for trespassing, for attempted property damage, for harassment. And with her past exposed, she couldn't hide anymore. The hunter was now the hunted. The subpoena landed on her doorstep 2 days later. It wasn't flashy. No cameras, no sheriff knocking. Just a court courier and a stack of papers thicker than a phone book. Karen stepped out in her signature robe, silk, bright pink, with Madame President embroidered across the back. She didn't smile. She didn't blink. She just snatched the papers, slammed the door, and vanished inside. She knew what was coming now. I was suing her, not for revenge, for justice. For every lie she spread, every dollar she conned from the neighbors, every minute she spent violating my land and peace of mind. And this time, I had an entire neighborhood behind me. Except I underestimated one thing. A cornered Karen wasn't a defeated Karen. She was dangerous by midweek. Strange things started happening. By motion cameras glitched out for exactly 20 seconds. Every night around 2 a.m., not a second more. Not a second less. My mailbox, one of those lock boxes on the edge of my driveway, was pried open and left swinging. Nothing taken. Just the lock snapped clean off. A dead fish appeared on my porch. Headless, fresh, not exactly subtle. Then it escalated. My boat, a small aluminum fishing skiff I'd had for years, disappeared from the dock. At first I thought someone had stolen it, until I saw it the next morning. Sunk. Someone had dragged it into the middle of the lake and scuttled it. The motor was gone. The hull punctured from the inside. And Karen, she was throwing a neighborhood BBQ that same morning. Loud music, matching HOA t-shirts, big bold banners, restore Craterbend, ban the extremists. She never said my name, but she didn't need to. I stayed calm, instead of lashing out. I sent photos of the vandalism to the sheriff and forwarded them to my attorney. I logged every detail, every sign of Karen unraveling, and still, I waited, because I knew the fuse was getting shorter, and I knew exactly what would light it. It came during the town meeting. An open forum hosted monthly at the community hall. Karen wasn't invited, but she showed up anyway. As I stepped up to speak, she stood from the back, holding a stack of her infamous flyers. Don't believe this terrorist, she shouted. He weaponized paint. He tricked elderly residents. He vandalized his own property for sympathy. The room fell into a hush. Eyes turned. That's when Martha stood. Karen, we've seen the footage. We've read the files. You trespassed. You forged documents. You lied. More neighbors joined in. Halvorsen, Betty from Lot 12. Even the bait shop owner who once glared at me. One by one, they turned their backs on her. Karen snapped. She lunged toward me, flailing her arms, trying to slap the phone from my hand, trying to silence me. But what she didn't know, the deputy sheriff was standing just 6 feet away. He moved fast, grabbed her mid-swing, cuffed her before she even knew what hit her. Karen screamed. This is a setup, he planted this. You're all blind. But nobody listened. She was arrested for assault, violating her trespass order, and interfering with a public forum, and as she was dragged out of the building, red-faced and still shouting, her final words echoed down the hallway. I am the law around this lake. This isn't over. But she was wrong, because for the first time in years, maybe ever, the neighborhood had seen her for what she truly was, and they chose something better. Karen spent just 48 hours in county jail, long enough for the sheriff to finish the paperwork, long enough for her lawyer to beg the judge for bail, and just long enough for the rest of the neighborhood to breathe for the first time in months. But she came out swinging. Within a day of her release, Karen filed a countersuit. It was 42 pages long, typed in all caps, and accused me and a half dozen others of property sabotages, cyber defamation, weaponing experimental security devices, causing emotional hemorrhaging, not a real legal term, and my personal favorite, orchestrating a psychological warfare campaign via subliminal lake noises. Yes, subliminal lake noises. Her attorney, a tired man named Vincent, who looked like he hadn't slept since 1998, quietly tried to drop her as a client after that, but the court accepted the filing, because technically, it met the minimum requirements, so it was on. Karen versus me civil court. The courtroom wasn't dramatic. Beige walls, uncomfortable benches, no cameras, but the tension in that room. You could cut it with a chainsaw. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Reese, with a stare that could freeze molten lava, went first. She laid out our case in perfect order. Fake HOA, her trespassing with video, her vandalism, her forged newsletters, her harassment history, and, most damning, her past HOA bans from 3 others of stakes each. Time Reese clicked to a new slide. Karen shifted in her seat. More twitchy, more unhinged. Vincent didn't even rise to object. He just rubbed his temples like a man praying for early retirement. Then came Karen's turn. She marched to the stand, uninvited, demanded to represent the truth, and launched into a 25-minute monologue that spiraled from pain allergies to mind control, security cameras to the deep state HOA cartel. The judge, an older gentleman with a world-weary frown, stopped her mid-sentence. Ms. Vaughn, do you have any evidence of anything you're saying? Karen paused, and then she smiled. I have one, she said. She reached into her purse and pulled out a worn manila envelope. This, she declared, proves it all. She handed it to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. He opened it slowly. Inside were photos, not of me, not of paint cannons, but of her, in Oregon, a gated neighborhood, dated 4 years ago, Karen on someone else's property, spraying graffiti across a mailbox. Another image showed her screaming at a mail carrier. The third showed her being physically restrained by 2 officers. The judge narrowed his eyes. Why are you submitting this as evidence? Karen stood tall, chin raised. To show how far they've gone to impersonate me, she said. That's not even me. The courtroom went still. The judge turned to Reese. Is this part of your discovery? Reese nodded. Your Honor, those were pulled from a pending restraining order filed in Clackamas County, Oregon, under her legal maiden name, Karen Von Lissette. We only received them this morning. Karen froze. The courtroom doors opened, and in walked a man in a gray suit, holding a briefcase and a notarized file. Your Honor, he said, I represent Mr. Charles Dunning, the man named in the Oregon restraining order. He's ready to testify. Karen's mouth opened, then shut. Her lawyer didn't move. He just slowly stood up, cleared his throat, and said one word, withdrawn. And just like that, her case fell apart. The news hit the town like a lightning bolt splitting an old oak. Fake HOA president loses court battle. Exposed for multi-state harassment, Karen Von Lissette's reign ends in courtroom meltdown. The photos from Oregon went viral first, especially the one where she was screaming at a mail carrier while dressed in a full eagle feather cape. The local radio host played clips of her court ramble for laughs. The judge's phrase, subliminal lake noises, trended on TikTok. For 2 days straight, Karen had become a joke, but a dangerous one. And jokes don't always fade quietly. The sheriff's department officially reopened a fraud investigation against her. Martha Halvorsen and the others began discussing class action restitution. Karen's once loyal circle, those who wore her HOA shirts and BBQD on her lawn, now posted denials online like, I didn't even know what HOA meant until last month. She said it was for the ducks. I thought she was just quirky. I didn't celebrate. Not yet, because something told me. Karen wasn't done, and I was right. 3 days after her courtroom loss, I noticed something strange. Her house was completely dark. No lights, no cars, no noise. Even the plastic flamingos she'd planted near her mailbox, gone. Then I heard it, a low hum. Behind my cabin, I grabbed my flashlight, flicked on the cameras, and stepped out. There she was, wearing all black gloves, headlamp, holding a crowbar, and kneeling. Behind my tool shed, I didn't say a word. I just pressed the record button. She froze. Slowly stood, gave me that same smile, the one that had once looked like confidence, but now just looked cracked and hollow. You know, she said, I could have made this place beautiful. My grip tightened on the flashlight. You were trespassed. You're about 10 feet from another charge. Karen didn't move. Her eyes twitched. Do you even know what I was before this dump? I ran an arts cope. I ran a gated development in Oregon. I was in the newsletter of the year finalist list. I blinked. That's not a real thing. She threw the crowbar. Not at me, just into the woods. Screamed. Loud, sharp, echoing into the trees like some dying banshee. Then she dropped to the ground and sobbed. Not out of sadness. Out of fury, rage, exhaustion. I backed away. Called the sheriff. Stayed on the porch. They came in 10 minutes. Karen didn't resist. She barely even acknowledged them, but before they cuffed her, she turned one last time. This lake was mine. You just don't know how to follow. I didn't respond, because the truth was, the lake never belonged to anyone. Not me, not her. It wasn't about ownership, it was about respect, about boundaries, about peace. And Karen had burned every single one of those bridges. She was taken in, this time with more serious charges. Violation of a court order, attempted breaking and entering, harassment, and criminal trespass. The community posted a public statement the next day, announcing the formation of an actual, legally recognized neighborhood board, one that would operate with transparency, open voting, and real accountability. They offered me a spot. I declined. I wasn't interested in control, I just wanted quiet. A week later, I sat on my porch as the sun dipped behind the water. My paint cannons were disarmed now. The cameras still blinked, but they hadn't gone off once since Karen's arrest. Then Martha came by, holding a slice of pie. You did good, she said, handing it to me. I smiled. We did. But just as she turned to leave, she paused. And by the way, I heard her lawyer turned state's witness. Said Karen tried bribing him to forge an affidavit proving she was a licensed lake conservator. I laughed for the first time in days. Only Karen. A month passed. No shouting. Fake violations. No flyers taped to windshields at 2 a.m., just wind in the trees. Loon calls echoing across the lake, and the slow rhythm of peace returning to Craterbend. Karen's arrest stuck. The DA filed formal charges. Fraud, harassment, criminal trespass, attempted property damage, and obstruction of justice. Her court-appointed attorney didn't fight it. He cut a deal. Karen pled guilty to avoid jail time but was sentenced to probation, banned from the neighborhood, and ordered to pay restitution to every resident she'd conned. She sold her cabin within 2 weeks. The buyer, a retired firefighter from Montana, who didn't even ask about HOA rules. When told the story, he just chuckled and said, "Hell, I like paint cannons." Felt like the perfect ending, except it wasn't the end. One rainy Tuesday, I got a knock on my cabin door. It was a young woman, in her late 20s, sharp eyes, rain jacket, backpack. She looked nervous, like she was bracing for something. "Hi, you don't know me. My name's Natalie. Karen Vaughn was my aunt." I blinked. "You sure you're at the right place?" She gave a sad smile. "Yeah, trust me." I invited her in, cautiously. She didn't seem hostile, just tired. She sat, opened her bag, and pulled out a sealed letter. "I found this in a safe in her old house," she said. "She never sent it, but I think you should see it." I hesitated, then opened it. The handwriting was unmistakable. Karen's. To whoever finds this. Maybe you hate me. I don't blame you. You probably should, but I want someone to know why I came back here. This lake isn't just a neighborhood to me. My sister drowned here when we were kids. We were 9. Nobody knew we were out that night. I dared her to swim. I always thought if I could fix this place, organize it, structure it, give it rules, maybe I could make it feel safe again. Maybe I could pretend like it wasn't my fault. I messed up again, like always, but I never hated any of you. I was just afraid, and control was the only way I knew how to not feel small. KVLI, set the letter down. For a while, neither of us said anything. Then Natalie sighed. "I don't excuse her. What she did was wrong, but she was broken long before you ever met her." I nodded slowly. "That part I believe." She stood to leave. At the door, she hesitated. "There's one more thing. The night she got arrested, she called me, left a voicemail, said something strange." "What was it?" she said. "Tell him I disarmed the last one." Then she laughed and hung up. I blinked. "Last what?" Natalie shrugged. "No clue. Thought it was code for something." After she left, I walked the property, nothing out of place. Until I checked the boathouse. Behind the row of life vests. Tucked under an old tarp, I found it, a small weatherproof case. Locked, wired with a crude pressure sensor, a triggered booby. Trap. Paint-based? Sure, but this one was wired to fire marbles and latex packets full of glue. Not lethal, but enough to blind someone if it had gone off. I disarmed it. Heart racing. She had planned one final act of sabotage. And somewhere, along the way, changed her mind. Maybe it was the court loss. Maybe it was Natalie. Or maybe, just maybe, she realized how far she'd fallen. I reported it to the sheriff. They filed it under intent with no execution. Her probation held. I burned the letter that night, not out of spite. Out of mercy. Story ended in chaos, but also with a sliver of regret. That didn't undo the damage, but it made her human now. The lake is quiet again. Not perfect. Not manicured, but real. And sometimes, when the wind shifts just right and the water ripples with late sunlight, I swear I hear a voice saying, "This place could have been beautiful. It already was. She just never saw it." The end.